Adrian hummed happily to himself in the back seat of the car. He was finally able to get Lila to be his friend. And not only her, but Luca and Kagami joined in too. He was initially hesitant about accepting Luca after what happened at the houseboat party, but Lila had explained it to him. Luca was simply trying to understand Lila more as a favor to Jalika's friends. He was only trying to help. Adrian was glad that nothing worse happened, but he couldn't find it in himself to forgive his classmates just yet. What they had done was borderline kidnapping. He couldn't believe that everyone was in on it. Couldn't they have waited? Lila would have opened up to them eventually. And Kagami, after they had fought, Kagami expressed interest in Lila and Adrian believed they would make good friends. After his conversation with Marinette, Adrian managed to make it to the end of their match, just in time to see Lila's win. Speaking of Marinette, a frown crossed Adrian's face. What on earth was the girl thinking? Lila had told Adrian that Marinette didn't like her and strongly suspected she was trying to kick Lila out of the school. Lila could provide no reason beyond a gut feeling, but Adrian trusted her. Marinette was already acting in hostile, suspicious ways around Lila, such as signing her up for volunteer work. The more Adrian thought about it, the more angry he felt. He shook his head to clear himself of his emotions. He doesn't want Lila to see him upset. He looked out of the car window just as it pulled up to a familiar apartment building. Lila opened the door and got in. Adrian shuffled back to make room. Good morning, Adrian. Morning, Lila. Good morning, Natalie, Lila said politely to the woman sitting shotgun. Good morning, Mississippi Rossi, Natalie replied. Adrian has modeling afternoon school today, and you've been invited to come along by Monsieur Agresti. Are you available? I have nothing to do, Lila said. I'll gladly come. Natalie nodded and went back to whatever she was doing on her tablet. They pulled up to the school soon after and two of them climbed out. Adrian, Natalie called just as Adrian was about to slam the door. Feel free to invite your other friends this afternoon too. Adrian brightened. Really? He exclaimed. Of course. Thank you, Natalie. Adrian closed the door and ran after Lila, who stood by the stairs waiting for him. Natalie watched as both teenagers disappeared into the school. All right, Placid, she said as they vanished through the school's archway. Let's go now. The car pulled away from the curb and began its path back to the Agresti mansion. As they turned a corner, Natalie suddenly spotted a young woman standing at the edge of the school ground. She was about Adrian and Lila's age, relatively tall and slim, wearing a green dress with strikingly long dark hair. For some reason, Natalie felt sick just looking at her. Her world lurched, and she couldn't help a terrified sensation that something was very, very wrong. The woman turned to meet Natalie's eyes as if she could sense her stare all the way from across the street, and she smiled. A soft, self-satisfied, unnerving smile that would haunt Natalie for the rest of the week. The young woman lifted a hand and waved, ceaselessly smiling, and mouthed, "See you soon, Natalie Sanker." Natalie gasped. "Stop the car," she shrieked. Startled, Placid jerked the car to the curb and slammed on the brake. Natalie was already throwing her door open, whipping around. She stood there, breathing heavily. There was no one at the spot the young woman should be. She couldn't have moved that quickly. There was nowhere for her to hide. It was as if she was never there. Placid grunted, almost coming out of the car. He looked at the spot Natalie was staring at, empty, before turning to her quizzically. Hi, Natalie swallowed and shook her head. I thought I saw something, she mumbled. I guess I'm getting tired. I need more sleep. Natalie climbed back into the car. After a moment, Placid did too, and they continued their way back to the mansion. Adrian and Lila were the last to enter the classroom. Everyone else was already present, accounted for, and staring at them as they came in. What? Lila said, irritated. It was getting tiring. It seemed like every time Lila entered this classroom, something was up. Marinette got up from her desk as Lila tried to move past her up her stairs. She had Lila a piece of white paper which Lila took and scanned the contents with a frown. Arrange seating, tables, and decorations. Check all safety protocols and function of fire exits and extinguishers. Hang posters around school. What is this? Lila demanded, not wanting to read more. The list of things to do stretched to both sides of the paper. It's your list of duties for the event next week, Marinette said. Lila thrusted the paper back to Marinette, so suddenly, she was startled into accepting it. I don't have the time, she said. I'm not even attending the event. Lila, Madame Bustier called from her desk. Remember, if you want your extra credits, you have to complete your tasks. What extra credits? Lila asked. It's a new idea that Marinette suggested to me, Madame Bustier said, clapping her hands together with a smile. Anyone who's struggling with a class can raise their grades through volunteer work. Isn't that excellent? They can exercise their physical and social strengths while still working on their academic. Lila isn't failing any classes, Adrian said. And we told you this before, she didn't sign up for volunteering. Yes, Madame Bustier said. I know, I remember. Then why do you keep bothering her with this if you remember? Adrian snapped. Madame Bustier flinched away from his hate-filled eyes. Adrian, Madame Bustier said smartly. Now that we're on the topic, I'm afraid I have some news. Your classmates had come to me with concerns about your recent behavior. I'm sorry, but for everyone's safety, we're going to have to move you to Madame Mendeleev's homeroom class for the time being until your behavior improves. Are you fucking with me? Adrian said. Language. Madame Bustier scolded. That is unacceptable conduct, Adrian. Please, I'm sorry I have to tell you this, but until further notice, you'll have to report to Madame Mendeleev's class instead. To Madame Bustier and the class surprise, Adrian simply laughed. No, he said. I'm not moving. If you want me to leave, you're going to have to physically move me. Adrian Agresti, this will not be tolerated in my classroom. Madame Bustier said angrily. I will not repeat myself again. You will either go to Madame Mendeleev's class or you can attend a different school. Adrian narrowed his eyes at his homeroom teacher and she stared defiantly back. The class looked between them. Marinette's breath was caught in her throat. No, this wasn't how things were supposed to go. The plan would blow up. Marinette's life would be ruined if Adrian was the one expelled instead of Lila. The tension was broken by a small sob. Adrian turned around, surprised, to see that Lila had started crying. What? He exclaimed, coming forward to gently place his hands on her shoulders. Lily? Are you okay? No, Lila sniffled and burst into tears again. Lila looked the perfect picture of grief and remorse on the outside, but inside, Lila was furious and scared. Furious because of all these bullshit schemes Marinette kept throwing her way. Lila thought Marinette was annoying in show, and it turned out she's even worse in person. And scared, because if Adrian leaves, Lila felt a fear she hadn't felt since the first day she woke up in this body. Adrian wasn't going to de-escalate the situation. The look in his eyes as he stared down at Bustier sent hypotheticals through Lila's mind of all the ways the situation could become even worse. Lila can't stoic and dismiss her way out of the situation. Perhaps it was time to pull a leaf out of her namesake's book. It's all my fault. Lila sobbed. Your friends are worried about you because of me. I'm taking up too much of your time and they don't like that you're not hanging out with them anymore, especially Marinette. Lila, Madame Bustier said, concerned. Isn't Adrian making you uncomfortable? That's what the class had been telling me. And no, Lila hiccuped and Adrian handed her a tissue. She melodramatically dabbed at her tears with it. Adrian is my best friend. He's never made me feel uncomfortable. Marinette made me feel uncomfortable because she's so jealous. What? Marinette shrieked. I am not jealous. Marinette has a huge crush on Adrian, Lila explained, quavering, as if the words she sang had to be dragged out of her forcefully. Ever since I came here and Adrian started talking to me, Marinette had hated me. So, I tried to push Adrian away, but he's such a good friend. Madame Bustier, she's lying. Marinette pleaded. She's lying. Don't listen to her. Marinette blames me because she thinks it's my fault she can't confess. Lila blubbered. She turned to Adrian. Adrian, I'm so sorry. If I knew I was placing a wedge between you and your friends, I should have let Chloe expel me. Yeah, Chloe yelled, and everyone looked at her. You should have. No one likes you, Lila. You should have never come to this school, and it'd be best for everyone if you just disappeared. Lila uttered a little scream of misery and pushed out of Adrian's arms and ran out of the classroom. Lila, Adrian cried, racing after her. Wait. Marinette stepped before him. Adrian, she pleaded. Don't follow her. Can't you see that she's manipulating you? She wasn't actually crying. Get out of my way, Marinette, Adrian said, trying to move past her. Marinette grabbed onto his arm. Please, Adrian, she said. Listen to me. Don't let her get to you. Adrian ripped his arm out of Marinette's hold in disgust. Don't ever touch me again, he spat. With that, he shoved past her and ran after Lila. Marinette stood along, watching as Adrian vanished past the door. Marinette, Madame Bustier said. Marinette swallowed, fighting back tears, forcibly composing herself. She turned around. Madame Bustier's face was unreadable. I think there's more going on here than I know, she said, although not unkindly. Take a seat. I'll talk to Adrian once class is over. What about Lila? Marinette asked plaintively. What about Lila? Madame Bustier asked. She hasn't done anything wrong. Although, I would like to talk to you too, Marinette. Marinette gulped. Lila entered a random room in a part of the school that was deserted and where she had never been in before. She wiped her tears off her face, blowing her nose, before throwing the tissue Adrian had passed her away in disgust. Adrian would find her soon. Lila took deep, slow breaths to try and calm herself down, but inner peace was hard to find when her rage continued to attempt to climb up her throat. Damn that Marinette, Lila hissed to herself when her pulse rate had lowered to normal. She sat on a desk, drumming her fingers on her thighs, trying to think up of a plan. It's not a theory anymore. Marinette was actively trying to get rid of her. Lila guessed Marinette wanted Adrian to be moved to another class so he wouldn't have to see whatever devilish scheme Marinette concocted. Lila's entire goal from the very beginning was to not get on anyone's shit list, but the small action of dropping her keychain in front of Adrian had grown into this butterfly-affected mess. Because Lila dropped her keychain, Adrian grew obsessed with her. Because Adrian grew obsessed with her, she ran into Chloe and Sabrina. Because she ran into Chloe and Sabrina, Queen Revenge happened. Because Queen Revenge happened, now even Gabriel probably had an eye on her. One day was all it took to topple her carefully laid dominoes. Lila noted the abnormality of the diminished number of Akuma attacks, but that's probably because Gabriel was planning something big and Lila was his target. But Lila can't focus on Gabriel right now when Marinette was actively trying to get her expelled. Marinette was well-liked around school, and she has more friends on the board than Chloe did. Damocles would be harder to manipulate this time around, and if Lila ended up in his office a second time, she was fucked. But even Marinette can't work miracles. First, she would need evidence to convince Damocles to get rid of Lila. She would need damning evidence of Lila's wrongdoing. Hello. Lila jumped, scrabbling off the desk and backing away when she realized there was another girl in the room with her. She was about Lila's age, with pale glowing skin and black hair done like she has the original Lila's hair. Long with a straight fringe, tied at the very end with a single knot. Her aqua green eyes reflected her sea green dress. But the most peculiar feature of this woman was her red lips, stretched in a wide smile. Hi, Lila said. Who are you? How did you get in here? This girl wasn't a student of Francoise Dupont. Lila was sure. She would have noticed someone like this in the courtyard before. Never mind me, the girl said. You look like you're having some trouble. I'm here to help. Help, Lila echoed. This girl looked familiar. She looked so very familiar, but Lila cannot remember where she had seen her before. The girl sat down on the desk across Lila. I'm Amber, she introduced. What's your name? Amber? Lila repeated. That was the name of her old therapist. The woman who had helped Layla after her father died. She was good at her good but disappeared one day and no one had heard from her since. I'm Lila. No, you're not, Amber said easily. Well, some people do believe you're Lila, but that's not entirely true, is it? What's your real name? Here was the curious thing about Amber. She's a complete stranger, a slightly creepy complete stranger. She made Lila feel unsettled and apprehensive. She reminded Lila of a time which doesn't exist anymore. Yet, for some reason, Lila felt like she could trust Amber with everything and anything. Lila confessed. Lila Ross. Layla, Amber grinned. You've gotten so big since I'd last seen you. Lila's eyes widened. That voice. Miss Chiney, she breathed. Amber nodded. How? Layla fell forward, hugging Amber deeply. Amber patted her on the back. I know, Amber said. I'm sorry I disappeared on you like that. It must have been so far for you. It was, for a while, Layla sniffed. But I remembered everything you taught me and was able to cope. Wonderful, Amber said warmly. See? I told you you'd be able to heal someday. Wasn't I right? Completely right, Layla chuckled, wiping a tear from her eye. A real tear this time. She sat back and looked at her old friend. The only proof apart from Layla's memories that she had a past life. Layla frowned. Why are you here? She asked. To help you once again, Amber replied calmly. This time, I'm here to give you the gift of life. Layla blinked. What do you mean? I'll show you, Layla, Amber said. Adrian was panicking. He thought that Lila was just ahead of him, but she seemed to have vanished into the school. No matter where he looked, which room he checked, she was nowhere to be found. Against Plag's wishes and advice, Adrian deigned to transform into Chat Noir, using the rooftops for a better vantage. He stopped. There. Outside the school, a mane of curly reddish-brown hair was standing on a sidewalk. Lila, Chat Noir called, rushing toward her. Lila looked up just in time as Chat Noir pulled her into a hug. Chat Noir, she exclaimed. Around them, pedestrians exclaimed and muttered in shock, some of them taking photos. Noticing this, Lila tried to wriggle out of Chat Noir's hold. Chat, let me go, I'm fine, she said. But Chat Noir only hugged her tighter. I'm so glad you're safe, he said. Lila sighed. I'm fine, all right? Sorry, but I'm fine. Can you take me home? I don't feel like attending school anymore. Of course, Chat Noir said. He picked Lila up in a bridal carry and swept her up into the sky. Yes, I understand, Gabriel said into the phone. The person on the other end jabbered on for a bit more and Gabriel resisted the urge to pinch his nose bridge. Well, if Adrian doesn't want to change rooms, he shouldn't have to. Natalie looked in concern at Gabriel. He waved to indicate that everything was fine. Didn't you just tell me he ran out of the room after his crying friend? Gabriel demanded. It seems to me that perhaps your class has a bad attitude, not my son. Gabriel hung up. Trouble, sir? Natalie asked. Nothing at all, Gabriel said. It appeared that Adrian and Lila had a disagreement with their class. Lila left the school and Adrian followed her. My goodness, Natalie exclaimed. Should we look for them? Gabriel shook his head. No, Adrian will likely find her and bring her here anyway. Natalie nodded before looking over to Nuru, who was eating a cookie. How are you feeling today, Nuru? She asked. Fine, Nuru said. The burning is completely gone now. Excellent, Gabriel remarked. Just in time. Master, Nuru interrupted. I would not recommend going after Lila Rossi at all. She has a unique ability I haven't seen in a long time. Both Natalie and Gabriel turned to the Kwame in surprise. You know what she is? Natalie exclaimed. Nuru, Gabriel ordered. Explain, now. Nuru flinched. I don't know, he said. I don't know much about it at all. The woman who created this ability had been dead for a long time, and it was so long ago. Damn it, Nuru, you're worthless. Gabriel snapped. Sir, don't, Natalie said. He's trying his best. Gabriel was snapped out of his murderous rage by his bemusement. I'm just going to ignore what you said, Natalie. Natalie sighed. Chat Noir brought Lila to the Agresti mansion. He dropped her outside the walls at a spot that the cameras don't cover. Lila looked at him in confusion. I don't understand. I'm taking you someplace where no one can hurt you, Chat Noir explained. I don't want anyone to go near you. Chat Noir left and Lila sighed as she waited for Adrian to inevitably emerge. Kid. I don't want to hear it, Plague, Adrian said. But this isn't you. I feel great, Adrian said. I feel like myself, this is me, so shut it. Immediately, Plague's mouth disappeared and no more sound could emerge from him although he tried to rebuttal. No, Adrian said, horrified. No, I'm so sorry, Plague. That wasn't what I meant to do. You can talk, you can always talk. Plague's mouth returned and he took a deep breath. All right, he said. Let's all calm down. Fine, Lila is here. What's your next move? I'm going to call Luca and Kagami over, Adrian said. I don't want to leave Lila alone while Marinette is still planning whatever it is she's going to do. Plague ducked inside Adrian's pocket as he walked around the fence of the estate. Lila was there, leaning against the wall, reading a book. Hey, he called, and she looked up. Hey, she said as she placed the book back in her bag. She stood up and neither of them said anything for a moment. Then, Lila held out her hand for Adrian to hold, and he smiled as he took it. I'm inviting Luca and Kagami over, Adrian said. Is that okay? Lila nodded. That's fine, she said. They walked toward the gate of the Agresti mansion, hand in hand. The silence in Luca and Jalika's bedroom was palpable. The entirety of Madame Bustier's class was gathered in the boathouse. They sat on the bed, in spare chairs, and on the floor in a group. Jalika was present, but Luca had left earlier, citing that there was something he needed to do. What do we do? Nino asked. Our attempts of separating them keep failing. Alia exploded. What the fuck was that? She demanded, yelling. I can't believe Madame Bustier fell for it, Lila's fake crying, acting like she's weak all of a sudden. She made us look like the bad guys and now Madame Bustier doesn't trust us anymore. She even lost faith in Marinette. I don't understand it, Mylene muttered. She asked Marinette, how does Lila even know about your crush on Adrian? Well, it's not that difficult to figure out, Max said. We all see the way Marinette acts around Adrian. A particularly observant stranger could figure it out and Lila is quite sharp. Yeah, that's true, Alia said, frustrated. But Marinette hadn't been around Adrian a lot at all. The closest interactions they've had over the past few weeks was sitting near each other in class. How could she know? The sharpest person in the world can't jump to a conclusion that quick. She's not human, Marinette said. The class looked to her. What do you mean? Kim asked. Do you think she's an alien? And no, Marinette said. I don't know, I just said that, but there's definitely something off about her. What should we do? Rose asked again, despairing. There was no easy solution. Adrian's obsession with Lila was reaching detrimental levels, and he seemed to only be getting worse. They were all worried. Feet coming down the stairs made everyone look up. Hello, Anarka called down. Wow, the entire gang is here, huh? Could some of you children come up and help me on the deck, please? The class gathered themselves and ascended the stairs together. Only Marinette and Alia were left behind. How are we going to get rid of Lila if Adrian remains attached to her? Alia asked. We're just going to have to distract him, Marinette realized. How? Alia asked. Marinette looked at Alia, then at her phone. Oh, Alia realized. I see. We can do that. Anarka had a carton of timber delivered to patch a section of the houseboat. The class was working together to sort the heavy wood into neat piles. Marinette and Alia climbed onto the deck and joined in. None of them noticed as Luca came onto the boat and went downstairs. Tucked under his duvet with the microphone unobstructed was his phone, recording. Luca picked it up, paused the recording, and pocketed his phone. He left the boat with everyone none the wiser and departed for Adrian's place. Kagami rode with her mother in their family car. They pulled to a stop before the Agresti mansion and Kagami was just unbuckling her seatbelt when Madame Tsurugi laid a hand on her wrist. Kagami looked at her. Be careful, Kagami, Madame Tsurugi said. Of the souls that ve passed. Okay, Sama. Kagami asked, confused. Kagami, Madame Tsurugi said. You must understand that when souls become linked, it's hard to break them. The evil will take over the pure. I don't understand, okay, Sama, Kagami said. What are you talking about? Be careful of that Agresti boy, Madame Tsurugi said. He's not who he seems. Madame Tsurugi released Kagami's wrist and sat back in her chair, her cane held between her legs. Kagami stared at her mother for a moment longer, but she didn't say anything else. Bewildered, Kagami uttered a final farewell before unbuckling her belt and getting out of the car. The door slammed shut behind her and Kagami watched as it drove down the road. Hey, Kagami. A wave and the tinkling of a bike's bell. Kagami turned and smiled to see Luca approaching, riding up on his bike. Hey, Luca. Luca parked his bike against a lamppost, locking it securely. Then the two of them approached the gate. Luca pressed the doorbell and an electronic tong echoed through the mansion. A screen retracted to reveal a camera on a flexible rod. After the lens seemed to blink at them for a moment, Natalie's voice said, You may come in. The gate opened. Luca and Kagami made their way through the mansion to Adrian's room. Hey, guys, Adrian exclaimed. He was sitting on his bed braiding Lila's hair. Lila looked over with a small smile. Hey, dipshit, Lila greeted. Dragon. Luca flipped Lila the bird with a joking, cheeky smile. Hey, Kagami said. I'm so glad you made it, Adrian said. Yeah, sorry for the delay, Luca said. I forgot something at home. I just got out of practice, Kagami said. Luca and Kagami sat close to Adrian, Kagami on the bed and Luca leaning against it on the floor. I have something to show you guys, Luca said. He placed his phone on the bed and played the audio recording. So, I was right, Lila said as the recording stopped playing. Adrian and Kagami were stunned into silence. You've already figured this out? Luca asked. Lila nodded. In our homeroom class today, our teacher was trying to force Adrian to attend another class. Adrian snapped out of his shock. She was claiming that I made Lila uncomfortable, he said angrily. Bullshit. If I made her uncomfortable, Lila would tell me. Right, Lila? Lila nodded. Luca inspected her closely. Lila's melody was dancing around as if it was nervous. He couldn't get a gauge on her at all on the first day they met, but now, her melody was far more expressive. So, she's opening herself up, Luca thought. What should we do? Kagami asked. I mean, I only met the three of you yesterday and I would like to spend more time with you all. I'm not leaving Paris, Dragon, Lila promised. Don't worry. Her melody was now dancing around with a low hum. She's happy and worried, Luca realized. Why? My mother works at the embassy, Lila continued. If anything happens, I'll let her know. She can make sure we stay. She's telling the truth about her mother. Ah, there it is. Luca moved his eyes to Adrian, who was looking at him with his usual cheerful smile, but Luca could detect murderous intent beneath. Why is this Marinette girl talking about how Lila isn't human? Kagami asked. That's a strange thing to say. It's because of how we met, Luca explained. Marinette invited Lila to a party we were holding here. Well, it was less of a party and more of an excuse to get Lila here. Why? Adrian asked. Luca held back the urge to flinch. His melody is terrifying. Marinette's class was curious about Lila since she wasn't opening up to them. They also wanted to know why you were so interested in her, Luca tells Adrian. The party was a trap, Adrian said. Luca nodded. You must have been a real enigma for them to go to such extents, Kagami said to Lila. I guess so, Lila said. Hey, Ad. Yeah, Lily. What happened upstairs when I was with Luca that day? Oh, nothing important, Adrian said. Luca could see that Adrian's original melody had been going crazy with rage, but the second melody wasn't as volatile. You sure? Lila asked dubiously. Yeah, Lily, Adrian said. Don't worry about it. She's feeling a bit of fear, Luca thought. Hey, Luca. Luca looked towards Kagami. Yeah? Why did they ask you for help? She asked. I'm good at reading people, Luca said. Reading their inner melody. Whatever sound they make, I can tell right away if something is bothering them. Really? Kagami asked. Interesting. What does my melody say to you? Well, I can tell by looking at you that you present a cold front to the world, Luca said. But your melody tells me that you have a warm side you hide from people. Kagami blushed. Dragon. Blushing red. Adrian exclaimed with a laugh. Don't laugh. Kagami complained. Luca gauged Lila again. Nothing has changed. She's still calm. Luca looked to Adrian as well, but he seemed to be at peace. His second melody was calm. The four of them talked into the afternoon, forming a plan to protect Lila from expulsion. Natalie was typing on her computer when she suddenly felt uneasy, as if there were eyes on her. She quickly looked around but couldn't see anything. Then, her gaze landed on a door across from her. That door. Nervously, Natalie stood up and walked toward it. She hesitated before opening, but she yanked the door open in one sharp move, heart in her throat, and nothing. Natalie looked inside the room and inspected her office. Nothing. I'm losing it, Natalie muttered to herself. She closed the door and turned around to get back to work. Then, she saw a girl sitting at her desk. She looked like an older version of the pale-skinned, black-haired girl that Natalie saw before Adrian's school. She still had the same wide smile with red lips. She taps the white conical straw hat she's wearing. Hello, Natalie, she greeted. How wonderful to finally meet a damned soul. Her voice, its eerie, echoing quality, sent spikes of fear up Natalie's back. Who are you? Natalie demanded, adjusting herself into a fighter's stance. I am named the Soul Collector, the woman said. Or, colloquially, most people know me as Death. Her smile, already stretched to its limits, seems to impossibly grow wider and wider. Death, Natalie said. Yes, Death, the woman said. But don't worry, I'm not here for you today, Natalie. At least, not yet. Natalie shook with fear. Then, why are you here? The woman giggled and held out a pale hand. I would like to make a deal with you, she said. Natalie's eyes narrowed. A deal? What kind of deal? A deal that ensures you don't go to hell with Gabriel when he does. Gabriel? So this woman was coming after Gabriel's soul too. What if I don't take this deal? Natalie asked. I go to hell? The woman nodded. Yes, she said. Then I'll go to hell with him, Natalie said. As expected, the woman said. Natalie took a step back as she suddenly pulled a long weapon from nowhere. Natalie recognized the blade. It was a naginata. Before Natalie worked for Gabriel, she had an interest in weapons and studied them in the hopes of becoming an adventurer. Her love of Gabriel had grounded her career, but she never forgot what she learned. Natalie held herself strong as she faced her enemy. 5 of Graves, the woman said. The cut came before Natalie could blink. She felt the slice to her stomach, and at the same instant, she was transported to another world. Natalie was seized by fear and terror as she looked around herself and realized she seemed to be trapped in some sort of place of undue horrors. Unrecognizable faces, all screaming in pain, asking for help, begging for Natalie to set them free. Horrible, isn't it? Natalie turned around. Lila, she exclaimed. It was her, just with a different hairstyle. Her hair tied in a low ponytail with bangs framing either side of her face. Her fox-like eyes stared at Natalie as if Natalie was prey. She wore a small black jacket and a long, light orange dress. I am Lila, Lila said. But not the one you think. I'm just a helper here. Lila snapped her fingers and Natalie screamed as she suddenly felt burning hot hands grasping her ankles, pulling her down. I think it's best to take the Soul Collector's deal, Lila said. You're not getting another chance. Natalie screamed more and more as the pain was exacerbated by an ocean of burning faces covering her. Ocean water. Natalie gasped. She was suddenly back in her body, back in her white office within the Agresti mansion. She fell to the ground, clutching her stomach, throwing up her breakfast. Blood poured out of her mouth in strands. Her whole body was shaking. That's the hell you'll be in with Gabriel if you don't take my deal, the Soul Collector said. So, do you want to hear it or not? Natalie tried to reply, to nod her head, but her body was paralyzed. Okay, the Soul Collector said. Hell, it is then. Goodbye, Natalie. Natalie blinked and rocketed up from her desk. Her heels slipped on the floor and she rolled back in her chair. It was a dream? Natalie took deep breaths, trying to calm herself down. She stood up to get some water, but felt a pain in her abdomen as she stood. Natalie paled. She pulled up her shirt and stared at her stomach. A red fresh cache decorated the flesh. Lila and Kagami waved goodbye to Adrian and Luca. Kagami was getting into her family's car and Lila was going to walk home. Adrian offered to drive her, but Lila refused. She wanted to walk. Adrian bit back his worries and his instinct to take Lila and put her inside the car himself. But he nodded and let her go. Luca climbed onto his bike and secured his helmet. Luca, Adrian said. Luca looked at him. Yes. With your ability, Adrian said. Can you hear my melody? Luca blinked but nodded. What does it say? You have 2 melodies, Luca said. Your original, and a new one. Adrian doesn't look surprised. Can you explain more? He asked. Luca sighed. Well, your original melody is nice and kind. Sweet. It tells me you see the best in people and try to be friendly with everyone. But your second melody is dark and full of possessive energy. It only comes out when Lila is involved. Adrian nodded. Luca, is it bad? Is what bad? The fact that I enjoy this second melody. I like how it makes me feel. Luca was shocked. I was worried about it at first, Adrian explained. When I scared Nino, I felt bad at first. But now I find it exciting, watching the fear in his eyes. Luca could tell Adrian was being honest. His melody sung the truth. When did this first start? Luca asked. This feeling. When I first met Lila, Adrian said. Something in me just linked with her and I couldn't shake it off, get over it no matter what I do. I want to be with her all the time. I see, Luca said. I keep hearing voices that are not mine in my head, Adrian said. And I listen to them because of Lila. All right, Luca said. He was getting uncomfortable. So, do you like Lila or? Adrian looked away. Whatever this is, he said. Whatever it's making me feel, I do like Lila. But I don't know if I like her in the way I want to like her. Do you want to like her as a friend, or? Luca asked. It's more, Adrian said. Luca sighed. He hummed to himself. The second melody wasn't showing itself anymore. This worried Luca. Okay, let's go back in time, he said. Do you remember when Nino got scared? Can you tell me what you meant by saying you liked his fear? Well, Nino pissed me off, Adrian said. This was after I found Lila was signed up for school volunteer work without her permission. I confronted Nino, slammed his locker door shut in front of him. Adrian, Luca said. Adrian held up his hands. I should have felt bad, but I didn't. His fear was intoxicating. I just messed with him more and more. I acted like I didn't remember anything that had happened between us, and his reaction was so funny. Luca placed his hands on Adrian's shoulders. Adrian looked up, confused. Go get fucking help, Luca said. What? Adrian said. Get help, Luca repeated. Talk to someone, fix this, get it out somehow. I have to go and think of something. Text me later. With that, Luca left. Plag flew out. Kid, that was great advice, he said. You should take it. Adrian turned away. I'm not going to. Why? Because I like feeling like this, Adrian said. He walked back into the mansion. Plag wanted to scream his frustration. Lila was at home reading the books that Amber had given her. I have to take the life force of another Kwame in order to make my own, she mused. If Lila remembered correctly, it was this season where some of the side characters get new. Miraculous. There was no way Lila would be able to get access to tricks or ways, but pollen was possible. Ladybug had dropped pollen in the fight with Style Queen. If Lila make it to the Eiffel Tower on that day, she'll be able to find pollen before Chloe does. But will things happen as predictably as they did in the episode? And didn't Style Queen happen at the end of season 2? Can Lila afford to wait until then? Tiki watched her ward, disappointed. Marinette had been waiting by her phone all day waiting for a reply. When it buzzed, Marinette swept it off her desk so quickly, her nails clattered into the wood. Chloe, my mother will be here for the fashion show. The rest is up to you, Depainchum. Good luck. Marinette smiled to herself. I don't need luck.